like to call to order the meeting of the Maricopa County Community College District Governing Board for March 27th, 2018. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Rebecca Moreno.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Moreno. Substitutions, we have Dr. Charles Nowenko for Dr. Bill Guerrero. Was I close to saying that right?
You did well, sir.
Thank you. Student life reports, Gateway Community College.
Good evening, and thank you, President Hendricks, members of the board, Dr. Harper Marinick, members of the CEC, and guests. My name is Fereste Flores. I am the chair for the Student Activities Management Council, also known as SAM Council. At Gateway Community College, we offer many leadership opportunities. In the fall, 10 students attended the Maricopa College Community District 3-day Student Life and Leadership Retreat at Pine Summit Camp in Prescott. We left there with an awareness on how to be an inclusive leader, how to grow our clubs on campus, and even expand our social network. In November, 24 student leaders attended the American Student Government Association conference in Los Angeles, California. At this conference, we learned recruiting and retention techniques from passionate presenters. The real power of the conference came from making connections with other student leaders from across the country. While in Los Angeles, we took this opportunity to visit the Museum of Tolerance. At the museum, Gateway students were fortunate enough to have a 1-hour-long conversation with Miss Martha Sternbach, a 91-year-old Holocaust survivor. We were given the chance to hear her story. She challenged us to understand the history on the Holocaust and examine the many forms of prejudice and discrimination in our world today. This year, Maricopa Community College District Leadership Institute will be held from May 20th to the 25th at Chandler Gilbert Williams campus. What is Leadership? Leadership is a 6-day leadership experience offered to students across the United States. 8 students from Gateway will participate in team building and individual character building activities that will focus on leading with integrity. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Julio Lara Padilla, and I am Communications Manager at SAM Council. Gateway Community College offers several events and activities where students can volunteer and get involved with program planning and campus events. SAM Council holds several activities on campus, including Pizza with the College President and Coffee Talks. These are opportunities where students can engage with faculty and staff away from the classrooms. This semester, Student Life and Leadership also helped plan the Gateway's Empty Bowls. The students and staff had the opportunity to purchase ceramic bowls made by Gateway students and enjoy a bowl of soup donated by Gateway's very own staff and faculty. Of the $2,000 raised, $1,000 was donated to provide program funds for 1 in 10, which is a nonprofit charitable organization dedicated to serving and assisting LGBTQ youth. The other $1,000 will be used to supplement the food pantry at Gateway for locations. SAM Council also hosts free monthly family movie nights on campus where we have about 120 attendants, which included students, faculty, and community members. The movies have shown this year were all family-friendly movies. Every year, Gateway students and staff gathered on campus for food, fun, entertainment, and good company at our Gecko Land event, which was held last Wednesday, the 21st of March. Many times this past year, we have served as a produce distribution site for St. Mary's Food Bank. Most recent, we distributed mangoes, zucchinis, tomatoes, and much more to 239 families in our community, which totaled to 100 people. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca Moreno, and I am Phi Theta Kappa Vice President of Fellowship, and I will be sharing about clubs and organizations at Gateway Community College. There are a broad range of student clubs that explore a variety of activities and interests that promote social, cultural, and academic awareness. College is about exploration, finding your passions, and having fun. In January of this year, Gateway held a club expo where students got a chance to gather information about the clubs on campus and decide which ones were right for them. Here are some examples. World Explorer Club and several other clubs participated in 90 Minutes Around the World, an international food and entertainment celebration exposing the different cultures in our school and around the world. Student Activities Management volunteered to collect pajamas and books for the Pajama Project. The project was founded to help children who have been removed from their homes and who are often shuffled between temporary homes. Our student athletes are always collecting food for the food pantry or collecting blankets and towels for the animal shelter across the street from Washington campus. The Math Club, besides being lovers of math, also enjoy doing volunteer work. Our most recent one was Feed My Starving Children, a nonprofit that provides nutritional, complete meals specifically formulated for malnourished children. Thank you for your time and giving us the opportunity to share with you the many activities going on at Gateway Community College.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Shaw.
could you, I know we always do this, so we're going to ask you to do it too, to tell us a little about yourself, what your major is, and where you're going, and when maybe you'll graduate.
So I will be graduating in May with my Associates in Arts from Gateway Community College. And I was a recipient of the All Arizona Scholarship, which pretty much is a full ride to ASU. And I will be minoring in psychology and mastering in fine arts.
Awesome, thank you.
I will be graduating next year, 2018, majoring my getting the Associates of Art as well, and then hoping to transfer to ASU to study mechanical engineering. Thank you.
I will be graduating with an associate's in associate's in science, and I will be hopefully transferring to ASU with a bachelor's in biology.
Thank you. Our emeritus recipient is not here tonight, so if I understand correctly, we're going to move that to next month's meeting. Thank you. Chancellor report, Chancellor Harper-Merritt.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks, members of the board. The transformation update for tonight will be a presentation by a group of faculty members who are leading the work on guided pathways. And we want to make sure that the work they have done, which is amazing in a relatively short amount of time, is known to you and is known to the public. So I will give all the time for the presentation to the team. And let me introduce them. We have Ms. Jen Fay, we have Selena Bednarek, Jackie Jesse, Camille Newton, Robin Oz, and I know that Steve Budge is not presenting, but I want to say thank you for your leadership as well, Steve. So I believe Robin and Jen may be presenting.
Thank you, President Hendricks, members of the board, Dr. Harper-Marinick, members of the CEC, colleagues and guests. First, we'd like to thank you all for your support of this transformation, which can truly revolutionize education in Maricopa. Done correctly, guided pathways can make a change for our students that will increase success and narrow attainment gaps from underrepresented populations, unlike anything we've ever seen before. We're here to talk about one part of that. There are 4 aspects that we're concerned with in guided pathways, including teaching and learning, meta majors, integrated student support, and curriculum mapping. We're here to talk about curriculum mapping, and so I'll continue with that, if I can get this to work. Up until this time, we've worked on what's been called a cafeteria model, where each of us worked in our solos, concerned primarily just with our own coursework, and students then followed our trend, and so they picked If the pizza looked good that day, they picked the pizza with really no further intention except maybe they wanted to transfer someday, or maybe they wanted a full meal, or maybe tomorrow they change their mind and try something else. We have seen from our completion rates and our transfer rates that hasn't quite been working, and let me tell you, this has been a national trend. And so looking at the research, we thought there has to be a better way. And that better way is to develop clear, coherent, and transparent pathways that are intentional and obvious to both the student and to the faculty and staff, so that students can attain their goals as efficiently and cost efficiently as possible. We do this by looking at our learning objectives for the entire program, looking at what certificates of completion they can achieve while going through their associate degree, and also attaining a transfer degree or going toward a transfer degree through our major universities and colleges. Although in nursing, we have many different programs, for example, that we have to map to. Actually, I said that the wrong way, because what we do is we start at the end, and this is the huge shift in our culture that is based on educationally sound principles. We start with the end in mind. What kind of human being do we want to produce from Maricopa colleges? What kind of human being do we want to produce from our biology programs, from our creative writing programs, from our English programs, from our nursing programs? And those form our learning outcomes and objectives. From there, we look at what transfer requirements there are, and from there we go back and particularly pick the courses that achieve the learning outcomes and the transfer degrees. So no longer do we look just at our courses, where it used to be only about my course and what I'm going to do tomorrow in my course. We now look at our program and our student. Not just my student for 16 weeks, but my student for the rest of his or her career. And as far as our staff goes, our advisors, for example, or our counselors, or anyone else who interacts with our students throughout their life cycle, no longer are they just schedule builders who see students for 15 minutes and maybe not see them again until they need to drop a class or do something else. They're not just clerks, but they become important career navigators in this system. They become integral parts of the student's navigating to his or her career. And now, here's Jen Fay, who has really taken on the bulk of this work and will take you through the rest of this presentation.
So we're going to talk briefly about the approach to the work, which is stolen from the playbook of best practices. So as Robin mentioned, we start with the end in mind. We look at what does industry need? What are the requirements to ensure a student lands at junior standing at their transfer institution that they choose to go to? We take all of that information. It's from there that we clearly state in student-friendly terms so they can make more informed decisions about their choices, what they'll be able to know and do at the end of the educational journey. And it's from there that we then carefully sequence courses. We identify critical touch points to ensure we're supporting them all along the way, critical milestones, and a whole host of other things. And we sequence those courses to build across the curriculum to ensure that they are successful in their chosen career and or transfer program. Another best practice that we have implemented and will continue to implement as we scale this to cross-college is cross-functional approach. This is truly transformative. Students come to one house, not multiple houses. And we are currently set up in silos, as Robin eloquently mentioned earlier. And so by engaging all of the folks that touch students on a regular basis, our foundational faculty in the areas of English, reading, math, communication, and student success in the area of counseling, our academic advisors, and then those discipline faculty, such as nursing, biology, they all come together to develop this holistic product that is the pathway map. and they all learn from each other, which sets us up for success in the future to further implement those best practices such as contextualized learning that we know, based on the literature on learning communities, is very effective at promoting success. It also sets us up in terms of academic advisors now, as Robin said, moving from the state of registration clerk to career navigator, because they too are growing with us all in looking at the whole student experience and advising towards careers versus what we need in the next semester. And they have the tools to do so. And we have a coach that is deeply invested and knowledgeable in the area of guided pathways, backward design, and all of the other necessary things that are needed to bring these folks together. The other approach is cross-college. We know one shared pathway among all 10 colleges is best for students. We know from our data that students take courses from multiple institutions throughout their entire experience. And so colleges, faculty from all 10 colleges would be working together to develop these shared pathway maps. So the timeline for this work, the transformation plan puts forward that we should have all pathway maps in the hands of students by the fall of 2020, and that is our goal. So working backwards from there, we will begin work as early as May 14th with this cross-functional, cross-college approach using the best practices. And we've begun the recruitment process thus far. So far, out of the 55 instructional councils, we have met outside of our normal hours with 25 of those instructional councils to talk about the why and the how of guided pathways in this work. And the structure of how we intend to manage this, so in terms of the number of pathway maps, it's a large number. We estimate by looking at workforce demand, student demand, institutional fit, that we have approximately 200 pathway maps that'll capture the vast majority of the pathways in which our students are in. And so we'll need coordinators that have, again, expertise in the area of guided pathways, pathway mapping to coordinate the various teams. And it'll need support of a project manager, administrative assistant, and program analyst in our SIS department in order for us to effectively carry out this work all the way to implementation, which is in the hands of students, faculty, and staff. And last but not least, our goal is to ensure that all of this work is coordinated. We have many wonderful structures, and so now it's a matter of bringing those councils, those departments, and those visions together to see this work through, not just in the short term, but transformation is truly sustaining this approach and this change in culture for the long term, this way of doing things. It's not what we are doing, it's what we're becoming, as Rob Johnstone has said many times. And so we'll be working with the various councils, the VP councils, the OC dean councils, the academic dean councils, the instructional councils, the advising councils, and so forth. I can go through all of them. Our curriculum offices and our academic and student systems and many, many other areas, which we've been doing to date. And that's the overview of the work to come, our approach, and our goals. Thank you very much.
Any questions from any of the board members?
Yeah.
Mr. Sox.
Great job. First of all, I'm a real fan of the pathway system. My question, and I'm sure the Chancellor's already got this figured out, where does CTE fit into this?
That's an excellent question. It is all integrated. So as Robin mentioned, as part of the process, we will engage all disciplines in this process, whether it's career and technical education or transfer-oriented. And we'll have an eye for increasing social and economic mobility. So where possible, we will embed certificates of completion that have a CTE focus with an Associate of Applied Science. And also, if there is a possibility, like in the case of nursing, construction, and many other disciplines, we'll ensure that we are carefully selecting courses such that if a student chooses to transfer either immediately or later on in life, we've set them up with the right math, the right humanities, the right social and behavioral sciences, whatever the case may be. So absolutely, it's integrated and fully part of this work.
So looking at it from the student's perspective, if I'm a 40-year-old person who wants to re-career, and I've talked to a couple of employers, I pick welding all the time, and the employer says, you need to have a few competencies before you can come to work for us. Where does this pathway to those competencies fit into the counseling and the coaching and everything else that you've put into this, which is it has to happen? But I don't see, there's no transfer issues here, there's no associate degree, there's no certificate. It's simply pure competencies. It may be one, it may be five. But that's what the student came here for. And having those in their hand when they walk into that employer gets them the job that they were looking for. How do you put this into your framework?
Yeah, it's all part of that holistic process. So you're absolutely right. Those are important things to consider, and we are considering it. So micro-credentials, right? They need key competencies. And so, for example, and we've actually worked with welding. When welding comes to the table, they have the support to build the entire pathway. But as they are building so, working with the end in mind, they look at opportunities to stack those micro-credentials within the larger degree so that students can easily earn those micro-credentials, gain that social and economic mobility, but then they're also set up where that micro-credential is fully embedded within a larger certificate or a larger associate degree. So that's all part of the work.
And this may be outside the scope, so throw something at me, and you can do that. If they come with out of the as a veteran with existing competencies that work toward whether it's a certificate or anything beyond that, does this have the ability to look at those as part of their pathway requirements?
Yes, that is a larger part of the work. You're absolutely right. So, but as we are engaged in the pathway mapping process, these are all of the questions that have to be addressed and considered and incorporated as part of the pathway mapping, whether or not that's the structure and the policy and the practice is fully in place. This process actually oftentimes highlights the needs for changes in practice, policy, and structure to be in place. So absolutely. And the faculty within those given disciplines who are talking to their industry partners really bring all of those to light, which again makes it a very best practice oriented designing with that end in mind for all students, not just the students starting at the beginning. Yeah.
Pick our welding, but do you have welding faculty involved, or pick any other CTE program in this whole process?
Yes.
Okay. Thank
And I wanted to go back to your question about the veteran, is we have a very robust prior learning assessment committee going on right now that will deal with that and placement in order to inform where students enter the map.
Excellent. Thank you.
And any, Camille or Jackie or Selena, if you want to add anything, feel free to go to
I
the
just
mic.
jumped in. I'm not shy. I'm so excited about this work. And part of why I'm excited about it is that question that you just asked. Sequencing is different from pathway mapping because sequences set up what all students or what we assume a student can walk in and do. A pathway map provides an opportunity for any student to enter at any point for whatever they need. And that is the difference here. We're creating maps that are accessible to any student at any point so that they can enter, get what they need, hopefully get a little bit more than they need so they want to come back. It's an exciting opportunity.
Well, we certainly want to give them the lifetime learning.
Exactly.
But with 200 plus mapping, what do you call them?
Maps, pathway maps. Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably a good start, because when you get into the next level, especially I'm a CTE person, but you have all kinds of options in those areas. So
by fall 2020, 200 is a good start. Thank you.
Any other questions? As they mentioned, this is one team of many teams that are working on other aspects of the transformation. So in April and May, we'll speak about the industry partnerships, and we'll have the team working on meta majors to come and speak of their work. We can have the team working on prior learning assessment also come and present. We just wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity, because a lot of great work has happened, to let you know the progress that we have made. So I want to say thank you to all of you and all the people that you represent. It's not just the 4 of them or the 5 of them doing this work. So thank you, board members, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Chancellor. We'll move to citizens interim. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the governing board. In compliance with the open meeting law, the governing board will neither discuss nor take action on issues raised during this portion of the agenda. When necessary, issues will be taken under advisement and placed on a subsequent agenda. Presenting concerns to the board and the free expression of ideas should be communicated with decorum and respect. Uncivil and disorderly conduct is not permitted. The use of derisive or insulting language or the direction of remarks that defame, attack, or harass an individual may serve as cause for the board's president to direct that speaker to immediately conclude his or her remarks. We have one person signed in to speak, John Levinson.
Thank you, President Hendricks and members of the board and anyone else present. I know I don't have a lot of time, so I just want to get through this possibly as quickly as possible. In the past couple months or so, we've seen the elimination of college football at the junior college level, which is an unfortunate thing, and I realized that part of why it was eliminated was because of the ongoing costs that come with insurance and also having to insure such a large number of student athletes. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the number of student athletes is around 380. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I believe that's the figure. In response to that, what I would like to address towards going forward as far as junior college athletics goes is that with the elimination of college football, I do believe that there is an opportunity for another sport to sort of take the place of what we now are no longer going to have as far as football goes. And I just want to throw a couple numbers out there. In Maricopa County alone, we have 94 high schools that offer a interscholastic wrestling program. And if anyone is not aware, I'm just going to bring this up. I'm just numbers here that I have. There are only 2 colleges within the state of Arizona that offer intercollegiate wrestling programs. We have over, I believe, 4,000 participating student athletes in the state of Arizona who are participating in high school wrestling, and we only have 2 outlets for that, one of which is a specialized engineering school, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Prescott, Arizona. And another number I'd like to throw out there is combined between Arizona State University and Embry-Riddle, only 14 Arizona natives are actually on the respective rosters for the college wrestling programs between them. Pretty much what I would just like to suggest is that in place of our now defunct college football programs, that we begin intercollegiate wrestling, and instead of competing on a national stage, I believe it would be more cost effective and also more time effective to compete within the California Community College Athletic Association, which is much closer than having to compete nationwide. And it's also what I believe is probably the most important aspect of that is instead of it being a 2-semester sport where you're having to go through the break and having to deal with all kinds of scheduling issues, it's a 1-semester sport within the California Community College Athletic Association. So you begin in September and be done by early December. So I just wanted to bring that up. I hope that this is something that can be looked at in the future and addressed going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now move to the consideration of the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are consent matters unless they're removed from the consent agenda at this time. Any item may be removed from the agenda by the chancellor as a matter of administrative prerogative or by the governing board upon motion duly made, seconded, and approved. Consent agenda items will be approved by one motion, and there will be no specific discussion of these items. Items removed from the consent agenda will be approved during the consideration of the non-consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Sarr.
I'd like to move 7.2 to be discussed along with 10.1 and 10.2.
10.1 and 10.2 are not on the consent agenda.
I know, I want to move them from the consent agenda to be discussed under non-consent items 10.1 and 10.2.
You want to add 7.2 to non-consent?
That's right.
Okay.
Or in between, wherever, just so.
Okay, are there any others? Okay, is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda excluding 7.2?
So move.
Second?
All in favor? So
Aye.
indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by saying nay. Motion passes. Consent agenda passes with the exception of item 7.2. We will now move to item 7.2. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Sardi, do you have comments on item 7.2?
I do. This is my 8th year as a member of the board, and policy and procedure in the past has been what it was. And in the last few months, we've changed that policy, especially in light of what is reimbursable for mileage and what kind of travel requests are improved for conferences and other potential travel. My conversation with the chair was, I'm not necessarily going to oppose my travel request at this time, but in the mileage request is a difference of $65 or something like that. So it's in a $1 billion institution, that's not going to break us. It is what it is, and I'll give the chair the ability to make those decisions. But I want to make sure that those decisions are based on a policy or a procedure that is well established and well understood. Since this was put on the agenda, we've come back with new language that does a better job of defining what criteria the chair will use to determine what is approved and what's not approved. But I just want, and that's what's in 7.2. I just want to make sure that we are giving the chair of this organization substantial power to determine how board members interact with this district, at least how they get reimbursed for that. And I just think that we are elected to represent the public, and one of the things that we do in that respect is to be with the public. My previous basis for putting mileage request was, if I wouldn't be on this board, would I have expended that mileage, and that was my criteria. Now, if that's not what this board decides should be the case, so be it. But I'm happy to see that we've got a better criteria than we had previous, and I just think that there's some room for more specificity in both the mileage reimbursement and travel reimbursement for board members. And if I can mix, Mr. Chair, 10.1 and 10.2 kind of in this conversation, I'll save some time.
Proceed.
The travel request, the request for me at this point is to attend the CTE summer conference in Tucson, which I've done the last 2 years and have done previously to that under a different organization. If I was in that position and really hadn't been to one of those conferences, how could I determine whether or not it had bearing on the district to have a board member present to bring the results of that conference or any conference back to the board in terms of a presentation, as I've done in the past on different trips that we've taken? I think we have to be a little more liberal, in my personal opinion, in how board members can interact with the public and with this district. So that is a request that I'd like to have reconsidered, and would enjoy. By the way, that conference is the largest in the state. There are other board members who attend, both in the K-12 world and in the community college world, as there are members of the State Board of Education and the regions. Looking at 7.2 and the new language, I just think this particular conference fits that particular requirement. So I request that the board, I'm not going to complain about $65 or whatever that number is. I'll leave that up to the chair, but I do request that the board consider my attendance at the CTE conference this summer. Thank you.
Any other comments by the board? Dr. Thor?
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. Before we vote on 7.2, you indicated that you felt that the new language was an improvement, and I certainly would agree with that, but you thought it could be further improved. Did you have some specific suggestions?
Well, 7.2 covers both the travel and the mileage reimbursement. I think, you know, we can go back over a decade, in my case, and in other board members, past and present, to find out what has been approved on a regular basis in the past, and from that glean what has worked as board members' responsibilities and what hasn't. And so it might be lengthy, but I think the more detail it has, it takes the subjectivity and the control of the chair over board members' activities within their parameter of their elected position to have more detail.
So are you suggesting that the policy would call out things like the Association of Community College Trustees, leadership conference, and related events specifically, that those would automatically be approved when presented?
And mileage is obviously the bigger thing. I just think, you know, short of calling up the chair every time we plan on doing something, we don't know for sure if we're going to get reimbursed for it.
Dr. Thor, do you have further comments?
I do not.
Are there further comments from the board? I'll just read the limitation. Says board member travel to professional meetings and conferences directly related to the board's role and responsibilities. That seems pretty broad. But further, the amendment goes to amend the guidelines, say these professional meetings and conferences should be targeted to an audience of board members. So if the conference is not targeted to an audience that would be us, then we wouldn't get paid to go, or routinely attended by board members. It seems broad enough that anything that would apply to a board member would fall within these parameters, and then exceptions may be granted thereafter. In the past, the policy has been essentially anything a board member wants to be reimbursed for, they can request, and the request had to be approved by the chancellor. My challenge with that is the chancellor reports to the board, and whether you're the chancellor or a lineman working for APS, I don't know who is going to deny a reimbursement request for the person or the body that they report to and that does your evaluation. I find that to be a tremendous challenge for this chancellor or any other chancellor, and that's why we made the change. With that, we've kind of mixed up items 7.2, 10.1, and 10.2. What we are voting on is the change in the policy, which would make conferences and mileage reimbursable to board members for professional meetings and conferences that are targeted to an audience of board members or routinely attended by board members. Unless there's further comment, we'll vote on it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 5-1, the motion passes. We will move to item 10.1, review of mileage. Mr. Sarr has explained his position on this one. If you want to speak again, that'll be fine. The way this came up is after we changed the approval process to take the chancellor away from a potential conflict of interest, the approval of mileage was given to the chair. When I looked through the mileage, I don't personally care about the $65 that somebody may or may not have coming. The problem is I have to sign the approval, And when I look through the requests and I see things on there that don't seem to be relevant to board business or things that would be done by other board members, I have to be able to defend that when I sign it. So if a member of the public asks me, or the Arizona Republic comes in and says, why did you approve this? I have to be able to respond. And so I didn't approve some of these because I can't defend them myself. I contacted Mr. Saar. I made him aware that I couldn't see a way that I could approve them. I don't want to be responsible for them. He indicated he thought I was mad at him. And I want to be clear, I'm not mad at anybody. I don't want to be responsible for approving these reimbursements. And I'll go through the ones that I did not approve, just so board members understand my reasoning. One of them is to meet with Mr. DeMena, who is a lobbyist for the district. I asked Mr. DeMena if he believed that individual board members had the authority to give him instruction or to give him any sort of direction. He said no. I told him I was concerned about a mileage reimbursement for a board member. He said, we've met quarterly for many years. We meet socially, we're friends. I didn't approve it. There are a couple of other items on here where it says the meeting is with Alfredo, a past board member. I can't see how you could justify such a meeting, so I didn't approve it. If Mr. Saar wants to refute those, that's fine. I want to be clear, I couldn't care less about the $65, but if I'm going to approve it and I'm going to sign it, not just for Mr. Saar, but anybody else, I'm not going to sign an approval for what appears to be a gift of taxpayer money in violation of our Constitution. The board has the option to reverse any decision that I make. Mr. Saar asked that the board have that opportunity, and that's what we're voting on. Dr. Thor.
May I ask Mr. Saar a question? Just a matter of minutes ago, we clarified the policy on mileage by indicating what would be reimbursed and what would not be reimbursed. You submitted this mileage reimbursement request on March 1, obviously weeks before we adopted this policy. Now that we have this policy, would you have deleted any of these items, or would you have submitted them anyways?
Well, good question. I haven't thought of it, but I would probably in the future, if I had been asked to meet with somebody, I would contact the chair and see if that was reimbursable.
Mr. Hendricks, I'm personally of the opinion that because this was submitted on March 1 and we did not have the clarified policy until tonight, that we should approve this but hold him and all the rest of us responsible for this policy going forward.
I can't support approving any sort of travel reimbursement that doesn't pertain to function as a board member. If Mr. DeMena feels that he was meeting with Mr. Saar on a social basis, if Mr. Gutierrez feels he was meeting with Mr. Saar on a social basis, I cannot justify gifting taxpayer money to reimburse travel for social expenses. I find it questionable that Mr. DeMena paid for a meal at this trip if this was a social venture, because Mr. DeMena also is a lobbyist for this district. And I hope those expenses don't get charged to us to reimburse those meals for a social visit.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Saar.
You made the assumption that they were social, not me.
I asked Mr. DeMena if he felt he could meet with a board member to individually represent the district. He said no, and I asked him about this specific meeting. He said this is a social meeting that takes place approximately quarterly. I didn't make any assumption about anything. If you want to say it wasn't a social meeting, I'm sure the board can evaluate that.
Well, I wasn't referring to DeMena, I was referring to a prior board member. And even though we are friends socially, we certainly spent the bulk of our time together discussing board issues.
Are there any further comments?
I don't believe we have a motion.
Well, you're correct, we need a motion. Mr. Saar, since you are authoring the appeal, do you want to make a motion?
I move that This is on 7.1.
This is on 10.1, the
I'm
mileage
sorry, 10.1.
reimbursement appeal.
I'm not going to make a motion because I'm quite, as was mentioned, this is $65. It's not that big a deal. I think the important thing to come out of this discussion is that we know going forward what we're going to be reimbursed for and what we're not.
Okay, item fails for lack of a motion. Item 10.2, travel request reimbursement. I authored this one. I will motion item 10.2, given a vote of passage. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Do we have comments from the board?
When you say passage, define what the actual motion is
I'm motioning 10.2 be approved by the board.
and read it, please.
It is recommended that the governing board review Dana Sarr's travel request for reimbursement to attend CTE conference in Tucson from July 2018. The effect of the motion would be to deny payment for the travel. Mrs. Haber.
What I'm wondering about is if a conference is coming up, the way I have interpreted the way we do things, it's a conference that we're all told about. And we all have an opportunity to attend it. And this sounds like a conference that I would enjoy going to myself to learn a little bit more about the subject matter at hand here. But it wasn't. And I don't know what the process is to put it out there for us to consider. Who decides what conferences we should attend and who makes that determination? Is it the chancellor?
No, it's the board president.
You make the determination as to which.
As far as if you're invited or you want to attend, any of us could ask to attend any conference that we chose to attend.
Mm-hmm. So beyond what we're told is available to us, because I always thought
Yes.
it was just those that were made available to us that we could attend. I had no idea I could choose any particular conference just because I wanted to go and thought it would be helpful.
Well, in the past, there's been no policy or guideline that I'm aware of, and the guidelines have been pretty loose. I say in the past, the approving party was the chancellor who reports to the board. So I think theoretically, you could take any kind of trip to anywhere you wanted for any reason you wanted. And if the chancellor chose to want to challenge that request at the risk of perhaps influencing her evaluation, then she could. But I'm not sure under what conditions what chancellor would do that. And that's why we changed the policy, is when we have requests for travel for whatever reason. On this one, the reason this came up, just for the history behind this, it was presented to me to approve, and I was not going to approve it because I went to the website and I contacted the organizers, and the information they gave me is this wasn't appropriate for a board member. And so I said, I'm going to deny it. Well, we later realized the chancellor had previously signed it off. So I wrote a motion that said, I want to reverse the chancellor's decision on this. And Mr. Sarr said he'd like to bring it to the board. If the board thinks this is an appropriate thing for a board member to do, then we can vote for him to go do that or any other item. We now have a policy that says you attend conferences that pertain to board members, that would be for the purpose of board members. You can't pick social interaction. You can't pick a location that you'd like to go visit. And so that's how this came to be.
Well, then we can still have it set up so that if there is a conference that the chancellor feels would be helpful to all of us, she can put it on and tell us about it, something of that sort. Because that's the only way I would really know about a particular conference, is if it was presented to me as a possibility. So that's still part of the situation.
Oh yes, so our new policy would allow you to attend any conference that was for board members as an audience. It was created for that purpose.
And the chancellor has the right to suggest.
Oh yeah, anybody can suggest.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. McGrath.
I'd like to have clarification here. If I vote yes, I am approving or denying the reimbursement.
If you vote yes, we are denying, it's not a reimbursement because the travel hasn't occurred yet. If we vote yes, we are denying the travel. If you vote no, we are approving the travel.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Barney,
may I ask a question to Mr. Sarr?
please proceed.
Mr. Sarr, can you tell us in regards to item number 2, how you feel, because it sounds like you've been to this conference before, how this conference directly relates to the board's roles and responsibilities?
Thanks for the question. CTE conference that we're talking about is both includes K-12 and community colleges as well as our universities. We have an organization of community college CTE staff that meets there as well. I'm excited the fact that our new VC of Academic Affairs is attending this conference this summer. So keep in mind this is in July, and it's it's in Tucson. So if everybody thinks that this is a social thing, you've never been to Tucson in July. And I get a chance to sit down with other colleges, in some cases board members, but in most cases it's the actual people involved in the front lines of instruction in CTE. We make a lot of decisions as board members when it comes to these programs, and we're going to make many more in the future as we go through the transformation. I think knowledge behind our votes is extremely important, and I'm willing to, I could think of a lot of things to do besides spend almost a week in Tucson. But I enjoy CTE, and I feel passionate that we need to make sure that our CTE students are treated as well as we treat our transfer students. And you really learn there what the opportunities not only are for those students in education, in those skill sets, but also how others around the state are addressing everything from transitioning students from the high school programs into our programs. We learn how various accreditations that CTE programs have, what the status of those are, where we're going to get many of those through grants and so forth that we are going to vote on. And my feeling is that we can't learn enough about how this money is spent when it comes to Carl Perkins and others by just reading certain things. And I can say that I've looked at the website too, but I've been there for 2 years, the past 2 years, and I spent 5 years prior to that under a different organization there. It is, to my knowledge, the largest conference of education in the state. And it just, I bring back, and I would be, me, I'd give you a presentation in a heartbeat of everything that I came back with that would help board members make those kind of decisions.
Dr. Thor.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. The problem that I have with this particular action is the timeline. Mr. Sarr submitted this travel request on January the 22nd, and it was approved by the Chancellor on January the 22nd. The board did not change the policy shifting approval from the Chancellor to the board president until February the 27th. And then it was only tonight that we then added the paragraph that indicated that these conferences need to be targeted to an audience of board members, are routinely approved by the board members. So I have problems with the fact that it had been approved under the old rules and now is being brought back for the new rules to be applied. So in my mind, we ought to respect that the Chancellor already approved this, but for future years, Mr. Sarr would need to comply with the policy and provide a justification that this does meet the board policy.
No further comments. Mr. Barton, do you have a...
No, I believe Dr. Thor just stated that. Also, item number 1, in terms of date, I was looking at that too, the January 23rd meeting, where 4.9 was eliminated in its entirety was the day after. So, same comment. Thanks.
Dr. Thor, have you attended this conference before?
I have not.
Chancellor Harper-Merrick, have you attended this conference before?
I have Mr. Hendricks.
Could you give us, I don't want to put you on the spot, could you tell us if this conference is targeted to an audience of community college board members?
I have not seen anything in writing that specifically says that. There's also nothing in writing that contradicts that. I was there in 2 occasions, one year as part of a meeting when I was in the provost's office. And then about 2 years ago, I was invited to do an opening keynote, and I did so, and then I came back to Phoenix. So I've never participated fully in the conference, but I haven't seen anything either that is specific to board members or that says specifically that is not for board members.
Does the conference target a high school audience or a college audience or a transition?
I think probably both, as long as it's CTE oriented. But again, I've never participated fully, 100% in the entire conference for a week. I've been there for one day, usually Sunday or Monday morning, and then I come back.
Okay, is there any further comments? I'll just comment that hopefully after this discussion in the future, we'll have a better idea of what's acceptable use. But even in the lack of any policy whatsoever, I would hope board members are being reimbursed or paid to attend functions that would be appropriate for board members and beneficial for board members, and that we're not just making travel gifts at taxpayer expense. Again, a yes vote would deny the travel. A no vote will approve the travel. Let's do a roll call vote on this, because I'm guessing we're going to have a split vote, and we'll need to know what it is. Mr. Bartning, how do you vote?
No.
Ms. McGrath?
Aye.
Ms. Saber?
I'd like to explain my vote for a moment.
Please proceed.
Whereas I agree with this philosophy of shedding light on how the board members spend taxpayer money, I do see worth of this. I really do. As I've learned more about it, reading about it here and listening to Mr. Saar, I think of myself as someone who would like to attend such a conference to learn more about career and technical education. And so I am going to vote no.
Ms. Hayer votes no. Dr. Thor?
No.
Mr. Saar?
No.
I will vote yes. The motion fails by a vote of 2-4. Next item is human resources, first readings. Do we have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move to 12.1, monitoring reports, business services. Questions or comments? Mr. Saar?
I am really excited about some of the things going on in the new office position. So I appreciate the efforts you're making to do a job of presenting data to us in a much more understandable way than we've had in the past. Not that it was wrong, it was just, this is so much better. So Elliot, thank you so much. And congratulations on your extension. Way to go.
Thank you. Faculty reports, Mr. Mitchell.
President Hendricks, members of the governing board, chancellor, members of CEC, and guests. As we've heard already, the Guided Pathways project is making substantial progress towards implementation. I would like to take a moment to commend to you the faculty who have been instrumental in the advancement of Guided Pathways in the district. Additionally, I want to commend to you the Guided Pathways project as an exemplar of successful collaboration between faculty, staff, and administration. Years before it was incorporated into our current transformation project, Guided Pathways was spearheaded by dedicated faculty in full and equal collaboration with local student affairs divisions and college administrations. Faculty worked diligently in a grassroots effort to research, educate, recruit, and train. They successfully expanded the base of support for Guided Pathways from Mesa and South Mountain community colleges to Phoenix College, Gateway, and finally to all of the 10 Maricopa colleges. In this way, they have been pioneers, and their work has been marked by all of the triumphs and struggles of pioneers. The numbers of faculty who have, who are, and who will shortly be directly engaged in Guided Pathways work prevents me from mentioning them all by name. Still, I want to acknowledge before you now the work of these faculty members and to thank them for their dedication, perseverance, and professionalism. The success of our students next year, in 3 years, in 10 years, and beyond will owe much to the work of these faculty. The Guided Pathways work does more than lay the groundwork for years of student success, however. The work also provides us a model for successful governance. Guided Pathways was a collaboratively developed solution to a mutually identified problem. From its origins at Mesa and South, this work has been marked by collaboration between faculty, staff, and college administration. It's one of the best examples of the effectiveness of shared governance in recent memory. As we work to improve the infrastructure and policies that support teaching and learning, let us always be mindful of the example set for us by Guided Pathways. Together, in equal partnership, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. Thank you.
Ms. Patricia Haas.
Hello. President Hendricks, members of the board, Dr. Harper Marinek, members of the CEC, and guests. I am Patricia Gale Haas, the president of the Adjunct Faculty Association. Last Friday, the AFA partnered with Maricopa Center for Learning and Instruction to host our spring learning and engagement for adjunct development called the LEAD, that's easier, conference. Our theme was I Lead the Future. We were at Glendale, which has a beautiful and ideal student union for our program. GCC, I work at CGC. Glendale was alive and hopping with student involvement, including a health fair, and it was fun to be close to that electric environment. Our keynote and the workshops focused on learning to be better support for underserved students. It was an important dialogue, especially with the adjuncts coming from all of the different campuses. Members of the transformation team, Maria Reyes and Alka Singh, came by and filled the adjuncts with more information about transformation and how adjuncts can either continue or start to participate and support the plans and support the students. Adjuncts are interested in providing feedback, always, and learning how to support students through the changes. Some will continue and some will start participating on teams and committees to continue the work. We would like to thank Maricopa Center for Learning and Instruction. I need to change their name. I'm never going to get it right. For their support of this program and the next one, which is the Outstanding Adjuncts Award. The candidates are chosen and they should be announced any day now. The dinner will be at Rio on April 12th, and you are all invited. We are pleased that the students are again creating these awards, this time at the Makerspace at Estrella. David Weaver has worked with the students to create a very unique award, but we all have to wait till next month to see it. It's going to be very different. We have about 35 adjuncts so far participating in the AFPG tuition reimbursement program, which reimburses about $1,000, up to $1,000, for those who are taking classes to meet Higher Learning Commission standards. This is a temporary program which will go through the summer of 2019. The adjunct team of the faculty developers continue to work together to support adjuncts and provide effective training. This is ongoing, and we should soon have some very helpful systems created to give adjuncts the support they need from the start. From the very different corners, there's been evidence of more and more consideration of the needs of adjuncts. So we thank you again for all of your support.
Thank you. Governing board reports. Mr. Bartney.
Yes, as the newbie, I had the privilege of attending the Small Business Development Center Success Awards last week with Mrs. McGrath, Mr. Sarr, Dr. Harper Marinek. And I would just like to say that the district should be very proud of their contribution to and involvement with the Small Business Development Center. And it's pretty impressive, the numbers that they shared with us at the Success Awards, and getting to hear the personal stories of the small business owners and what they've been able to accomplish both here in Maricopa County and across the state of Arizona. Thank you.
Mrs. McGrath.
Mr. Bartney gave my report for me about the Small Business Administration. It was wonderful. Thank you.
And he did a good job. Mrs. Haver.
Nothing specific to report. I'd just like to mention that I visited the Pompeii exhibit that's in the downtown Science Museum. I would highly recommend it for anybody who's interested in archaeology, ancient history. It was really an excellent exhibit.
Dr. Thor.
No report.
Mr. Sarr.
I attended again this year the Student Success Awards in Mesa a couple weeks ago, and that is an event that really makes it worth the while to be a board member sometimes when you see what those students have accomplished and where they're going. Even some are going to NAU, the better ones. And I want to make sure that everybody realizes how well Maricopa does in providing the scholarships, as the one individual that gave the presentation from Gateway said today. She is going to ASU on a full scholarship because of her getting the award at that situation. It's just amazing. Brings all the colleges from the state in one place to talk about their students and to congratulate them, and really, it's one of those things you feel good about when you go home.
I have no report. The next meeting dates, my script says March 27th. I'm guessing that's not the next meeting. Is it April 27th? Did we have a calendar? April 24th. Yes. April 24th is the next scheduled regular board meeting. I know tonight there was concern because we changed the meeting by an hour, that some people were concerned that they may not be able to make the meeting. But I think everyone learned that it was changed by an hour. The April 24th meeting is likely to change as well. I know there's 2 board members that can't be here, so it's likely that's going to be scheduled on another date, but for now it's scheduled for April 24th. But just so everyone knows, watch that it may change. We'll make as much notice as possible. I've been reminded that we have a budget meeting for a budget review on April 10th at 2 o'clock. It's scheduled for 2 hours, I believe. With that, if I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second it.
Meeting's adjourned.